Executive Suite with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. Always glad to have you with us. Later on the show, we're going to talk to an executive from Spectra Energy, the company that runs the big Algonquin natural gas pipeline that's been in the news. They're looking to expand that as New England tries to ramp up its energy supply. We're going to hear a lot about what's going on with that. But right now, I'm very pleased to be joined by the somewhat new, maybe not totally new yet, but still getting used to the job, Providence's Economic Development Director, Mark Huang. Mark, thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So, Mark, Mayor Lorza hired you for the job last July. You were previously, you were with General Electric. You actually served in Iraq, right, in the military. You've been all over the place. Now you're here in Providence. You took this job. You're learning the lay of the land. What have been your impressions, your takeaways so far as you've gone on a bit of a listening tour as you get used to the place?
Sure. It's been 4 months. It's been a fun, exciting 4 months. It's an exciting place to be. I mean, there's so many unique attributes of Providence in Rhode Island as I continue to learn more. I just came from an organic natural food company as they continue to grow. The city itself is so strong in the design space as well as food. I call it new food. We can talk about that later if what that means. And there's a creative entrepreneurial aspect to the city. The city's beautiful on the architecture. And everybody has been so supportive, and you know, part of the logic for me personally was like you have new leadership with the mayor and the governor. Some people argue Rhode Island is a city-state-like, and so it's not as if this is huge and unmanageable. And I think there's a lot of unique attributes about Providence that I think we can get the word out and really try and build something.
As you know, there are frustrations in Providence about the pace of economic growth, about development, et cetera. You know, as you listen to that and try to have honest conversations, what are the biggest challenges you see or the biggest problems the city is facing right now? And, you know, what are rising to the top for you?
Sure. So one is the stats. As we all know, the stats are not good. So that's what I'm coming into.
You mean like unemployment, things like that?
Exactly. Yeah. Is there the right labor force? Is there enough financial capital for startups or medium-sized businesses? And then the cost of doing business. So I think I want to answer that. That is the biggest challenge. My sense coming in new and also talking to people who are not from Rhode Island is the reputation is that this place is a difficult place to do business. It's an expensive place to do business, and so you have a high cost structure relatively, but yet you don't have maybe the economic, dynamism that other parts of the country do have, maybe like our neighbors. And so you don't get the same rents, you can't attract the same amount of people. So that's, I think, is my sense in the last 4 months is maybe the playing field that I see for this position.
How much, we were talking a little before we went on the air about the city's property taxes and things like the perennial complaints, and you kind of referenced it there with the cost of doing business. How much can the economic development director do? You know, your job isn't to write the budget. You have to deal with the budgets that get passed. Yeah. How much for you is it to work around that stuff, and how much is it to say frontally, look, we have to tackle that stuff because that's what's eating away with our economic development?
No, fair enough. So there's the residential side and then a commercial side. I've lived in New York and San Francisco, so I hesitate to say this, is our property taxes are, I didn't blink too much, but that doesn't mean that some people would argue that they're not too high on a residential side. There are some other taxes on a personal level that if you live in Providence that
the car tax,
yeah, exactly, in a sense. So putting the personal side is you attract companies that come here and they're mid-level professionals who have to look at schooling and what's the cost of living. That's a fair point. But the real estate costs itself on a relative basis for the Northeast are very attractive in an area that is just essentially very beautiful. And we're not isolated. We're south of Boston and up the coast from New York. And so I'd say maybe it's not a good comparison again because San Francisco is pretty
expensive.
Expensive, and I'm in the process of selling my house there, and the ratio is roughly.
Maybe you ought to retire at the way things are going there.
Yeah, I didn't get that good of a price, but it's a roughly 4-to-1 ratio.
Yeah,
right? About twice the house.
How about on the commercial side though? That's
Sure.
usually where we see it with the high property tax rankings and such.
Fair enough, and. So on a property, there is a effort, right, from the mayor to stabilize the tax agreement. So if you do come in and as a new business, there is a tax stabilization agreement that is designed to be much more transparent. Separate, related, is the 195 quarter, which has its own agreement. So there is a push from the leadership, and this is all obviously done before I have gotten here, is to tackle that head on. And I think the view is now on the ground is, if you're a business and you're thinking about Providence, we want to be as transparent as we can about what tax incentives to tackle some of those high costs that perceived or not perceived, and come in and sit with us, and we'll work it through because we're hungry.
How about the 195 land? You mentioned that. It seems like a lot of that's being driven by the state. You have the 195 Commission. Governor Raimondo and Commerce Secretary Pryor have taken a big interest in that, obviously. What do you see as the city's role in that? Is it primarily just the tax break piece of it, or do you see other things the city can do?
No, I hope not. Right, because that was one of the 195 quarter was one of the points that attracted me to this position. Well, first, the mayor has appointed members of that board. Mm-hmm. The 195 land is in smack downtown Providence. And then the third point I would make, which is another reason why I was very attracted to come here, was this, that I'm told it may not be a given historically. I don't know the history as much as that the state and the city have a great rapport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not always been the case.
Okay, so thank you. All right, so I said that with a little bit of caution, and so we're all in it together. Mm-hmm. Is my point. So with that said, is I have a venture background. I worked 10 years at GE Capital, helped restart their new venture group, and also worked in business development. So those type of roles was the question of what's kind of coming around the corner on a global macro environment, and can you come up with a plan to go after these new trends? The 195 quarter, I think, is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for Providence, and there's always been a push for this knowledge economy to double down on that, and I think we have the best shot ever, I think, in Providence right now to do that. And I'd say it's not just the amount of money investment that's already going in from the existing stakeholders, such as Brown and URI, but we're seeing outside investors starting to come in and develop. Not all of it's public yet, and so we're out on the road telling the world is we have so much going for us in Providence. It's with our academic institutions, our entrepreneurial spirit, our focus on the arts and culinary and design. And we think that this is the future of a knowledge economy. So that's part of my push with the 195 quarter.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more with Mark Huang about his job as Providence's Economic Development Director and the city's future. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and later on in the show, we're going to talk about the future of the energy supply in southern New England with a top executive at Spectra Energy, which owns the Algonquin pipeline that's been in the news. But right now, very pleased to be talking with Mark Huang. He is the Director of Economic Development in Providence, working a top aide for Mayor Lorza at City Hall. So my colleague Dan McGowan quoted you last week, raised a few eyebrows, but I definitely want to hear your case for this. You said, quote, "We are making the argument that we are well on the way to being America's next tech hub." We don't always associate Providence with being Silicon Valley light or whatever it is, but I'm curious, what makes you say that? What gives you that hope?
Sure. So having a venture background, and I think the thesis is that we don't need to necessarily go wide. Let's do this, let's do that, because they're doing this, is let's go deep. So what I mean by that is, and this is the way I've been trained to think, is what areas that Providence have that has a core competency in that happen to be on a global basis, not just North America, attracting a lot of innovation capital, venture, not just venture capital, but corporates, R&D. So what are those sectors tied to Providence? One is food. Roughly, I've read $1.8 billion of food venture capital in the last 2 years has been invested. We haven't caught much of that, but I think you can make an argument that Providence has a core competency in food across the board, whether that be organic, natural, sourcing locally. We have a technology competency, particularly at Brown. We have obviously Johnson Wales. There's a large, one of America's largest organic natural food distributors is headquartered in Providence,
yep.
UNFI. And then let's go to the ocean. There's a big push among the investor base whether directly or indirectly. They'll either give the money to a venture capitalist or these are family offices investing themselves and anything to do with oceans and sustainability. That story that we have on our oysters is a great story. I mean, not only is it clean, because it's not a given for aquaculture. There's a lot of environmental issues. Ours with the shellfish is clean, and most of these oysters that are being farmed are family owned, right? And then we are a leader, obviously, in oceanography on a global basis. So that's one sector is related to sustainability, food. The second one in certain sectors of biotech, not my background, but spending a lot of time with the very smart people at Brown, as well as our ecosystem like Lifespan. I think my sense is a lot of work around holistic ways to treat the aging that Rhode Island has done that I think we can demonstrate to the world, whether that be policies developed by CVS to using new LED lighting with the Internet of Things to keep track of elderly patients and using dynamic color tuning to reduce dementia.
You mentioned biotech there. I'm curious, were you concerned about the closure of NABSIS, Barrett Brady's? That was one of our most talked about life sciences startups. I mean, is that a bad sign, do you think, for Providence's biotech, nascent life sciences field, or do you think that's just a one-off?
I think it's a one-off, and if we have a true venture ecosystem, there are many investors, which we don't have a lot of, perfectly institutional backed, and you have a lot of startups. So I've done many companies. Few of them have not made it. They usually die a quiet death. A lot of teeth grinding, but behind closed doors. So Nabasis, I don't know the company, but it's not rare for a startup company. Venture capital, by definition, is one of the riskiest asset classes, right? So for every success you see, there's a large number that have failed. So
kind of like movies are a hit-driven business, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and you always know the big ones, right? and so I think we need 10, 15 NABs. We need to figure out an ecosystem where we have the ability to keep 10 or 15 NABSs, and that is maybe having 10 to 15 types of investors that are tied into the ecosystem of RISD, Johnson Wales, URI, and Brown, and the rest of a very entrepreneurial culture that we have.
I was thinking about what a final question would be, and I'm curious. You've sort of had your time where you've been getting used to the place. 2016 is gonna be your first full year in it. Do you have a top priority for 2016? Something that's you feel like it'll take the highest percentage of your calendar, or however you measure that? Do you have a top priority for next year?
Sure. Well, number one priority, of course, that comes with the title of the position, right? Is to encourage businesses that are interested in coming to Providence and making it sure that it's a seamless and painless as possible. So we do have companies that are calling and saying we're interested in coming to Providence. So that's obvious, right? That always takes number one priority. So the strategic vision of mine in 2016 is as I mentioned, is how do we continue to build on 195? That's such a unique opportunity for us, particularly creating that venture ecosystem. Two is around certain sectors. My end state is that we're able to attract a new form of light manufacturing back into Providence, which I think in the last few decades has been in a steady decline.
Yeah.
So have some ideas there, and starting to work on it.
All right. Well, Mark Huang, Providence's Economic Development Director, will be watching and see what you do. Thank you very much for joining me. But don't go away, because up next we're going to talk with an executive from Spectra Energy about the future of electricity and natural gas supplies right here in southern New England. Stick with us. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi, and now for this section, I'm very pleased to be joined by Richard Paglia. He is the Vice President of Spectra Energy, one of the major energy companies in the United States, has a big footprint here in Rhode Island. Rich, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We're going to start off with a map. People love a map that can show kind of the footprint of Spectra across the country. It's a national map of your what your holdings are. And we see it right there. This is a look across the country of your portfolio of assets. So what are we looking at there? What do you do at Spectra?
Yeah, so quickly, Spectra Energy is one of North America's leading pipeline and midstream companies. We, across our 30 U.S. states and 7 Canadian provinces, over 22,000 miles that you can see on the graphic there, we transport natural gas liquids, and crude oil. We employ about 5,700 people across that footprint. And just put some perspective around the assets that we operate and maintain, we deliver on any given day about 15% of all the natural gas consumed in North America.
Wow, that's a lot of natural gas, and it really matters around here because people have probably heard at this point. I think the story has gotten out about just how I'd say almost explosive the growth has been in natural gas electricity generation in New England. I mean, the numbers are pretty incredible how fast it's gone.
Correct. Yeah, there's been two main drivers, particularly in the New England region. One, fueled by the conversions of home heating oil to natural gas at the residential level, and then, as you said, at the power generation level. You know, on a day like today, almost 65% of the electricity that we're using is fueled by natural gas. In the wintertime, that number goes down to about 15%. That kind of highlights the challenges. On those coldest of winter days, there's not enough pipeline capacity to supply those gas-fired generators. So
and that's what part we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of your projects going on with that. Do you expect the natural gas consumption in New England to keep growing in all the different sectors that are using it right now, or do you think we're starting to get to a peak?
I think with respect to the power generation sector, I absolutely see a large increase looming. You may be familiar just recently the announcement of the Pilgrim nuclear facility.
Over in Plymouth.
In Plymouth, yeah. Between 2014 and 2019, there's forecast to be almost 4,200 megawatts of retirements of old, either nuclear, coal, or oil. And what's there to replace them are natural gas facilities, and wind is the other primary resource.
So absolutely,
so I do expect it to grow. The short answer to your question.
Now, the problem, of course, or at least the challenge, is that there's more and more demand for natural gas in New England. But as we see in the winters, it's harder and harder to get enough here in the existing pipelines. Like Governor Raimondo's talked about this a bunch. Governor Charlie Baker's been talking about this too. What is the constraint here? Is it just we just didn't build to match what we were going to use at this point in time?
Yeah, great question. And let me start off by saying the governor of Rhode Island has been excellent. Her staff have been leaders on trying to address the very problem that you highlighted. With respect to the problem itself, there's a variety of factors that have gotten us to where we are, and I think we're making very good progress with respect to meeting the needs of the gas utility consumers in the region. We have several projects in flight that will address those over the coming years. The power one is a little more challenging, and that's where we're focusing a lot of our energies and have put forward a project, the Access Northeast project is called, to address that very question. And without that project going forward, we will really be constrained. We already pay the highest electricity prices in the country here in New England. And without some infrastructure being dedicated there, we won't be able to temper those prices and create some economic stimulus and job growth. So
so is it over time that would the problem be we'd end up with just very high prices, or could we end up with just not enough natural gas to, I don't know, for what we I assume there's a certain level of just what you need that's mandatory for the power plants and for the homes?
Yeah, great question. So the high prices are a direct result of the lack of infrastructure to support the power generation needs. And if you talk to individuals at ISO New England who will operate and maintain the electric grid here, they are very concerned about the integrity of the system, the ability to keep the lights on, no pun intended. And to that end, over the last several years, they've had to institute what they call winter reliability programs to make sure that coal and oil resources are available to ensure those lights don't go out. So, and that has obviously a tremendous drag on the environment. The fact that we're relying on coal and oil resources in this day and age, when we have a fuel like natural gas that's got the lowest carbon footprint of any fossil fuel, it's a step backwards.
And you've been making that case. As I think we have a second map to show that I'll go along with that, which is your Algonquin transmission line. Now this goes through Connecticut and Rhode Island and everything, and this is the one that's really been in the news. Tell us about the project going on with Algonquin. Yeah, so the Algonquin pipeline has been in service in the New England region for over 60 years. Traverses through the northwest corner there, you can see, of Rhode Island, and feeds the regions of Newport down through National Grid on the distribution side. And interesting, I made reference earlier to 15% that we supply across North America. Algonquin provides almost 45% of all the natural gas consumed in Rhode Island on any given day. So a tremendous presence here in the region. However, to your question, we need to expand that pipeline. We need to ensure we have adequate supply to meet those growing needs for the residential users I alluded to earlier, and to meet the needs of the power generation facilities. And that's what the three projects we have in flight are targeted at doing, just that. And with that, in the progress that will ensue,
we'll be able to temper those prices. We'll be able to create an economic platform for growth and move this effort forward.
Now, those projects, do you know when those will be done, when you'll be getting the full benefit of those?
Yeah, so the first project we refer to as our Algonquin Incremental Market, or AIM project. Sorry for the
exciting name,
mouthful. Yeah, exciting. We're really original sometimes at the company with those. That project is actually under construction, so targeted to serve the needs of southern New England gas consumers, and will be in service in 2016. Following on the heels of that is another project called the Atlantic Bridge project, which continues with that expansion of the Algonquin system, but targets more of northern New England and even some industrial customers up in Atlantic Canada via our Maritimes and Northeast pipeline. And that also should target for an in-service of 2017. And the final project, the one that we're focused most on today, the Access Northeast one for the power generation sector, we're hoping to file the what we call the pre-filing with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in the coming weeks, and progress that through the evaluation process and have it online as early as 2018.
Now, do you think those projects, combined with what your competitors are doing elsewhere in New England that we've also heard about, is that quote-unquote enough? You know, is that okay? And the slate of projects the private sector has on the table before regulators, that's going to get us where we need to be. We'll stop complaining about this. We'll have the supply we need.
You know, there's a lot of studies out there that talk about we need this much, we need that much. You know, from the pipeline company's perspective, we are addressing the needs of our customers. That's the role we play. We're not allowed to speculate as to how much infrastructure we should build. We respond to the needs of the marketplace, and that's what these projects represent: the needs of the gas consumer and the power generation sector.
As you point out there, it's a heavily regulated industry. We only have about a minute left, but you know, I assume you have to interface with state government leaders a lot about this stuff. I know Charlie Baker's been working on it. Is there anything Spectra's been looking for from Rhode Island policymakers? Any proposals you've had, et cetera, that you want the PUC or the governors or the legislature to work on that you think would address some of these issues too?
I would just say, like I said, Governor Raimondo and her team have been excellent. They've been leaders on this front, and I'd ask that they continue to be leaders for us. That's all we can ask for. I think the stars are beginning to align with the various states to support infrastructure specifically to address the challenges on the power generation side. And I think with their continued leadership and the respective states around us, we can get there. So I would just say continue what you're doing.
Very briefly, only 15, 20 seconds left.
Sure.
What's she done that's so great? What's been helpful?
They've passed legislation recently that will allow the contracting for this capacity that I alluded to for the power generation sector, and just the support for more development of infrastructure to bring new supply, make sure we have adequate supply in the region, temper those prices. She absolutely acknowledges that we're paying too much for energy. And wants something done about it. And that's the kind of leadership we need here.
Well, she'll be glad to have you saying that on TV.
Good.
So Rich Paglia from Spectra Energy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you,
and thank you for joining us this week on Executive Suite. See you again next week.